Hi, and welcome to the Spanish class for beginners. In this class, our main goal is to learn the Spanish alphabet with its pronunciation. If you keep up with me throughout the course, you will learn the alphabet, which is very important to be able to read and speak in Spanish. So let's start. Before we begin with the alphabet, I want you to know that the Spanish is built around syllables. And a syllable is a combination of consonants and vowels. But a vowel by itself can be a syllable. So for example, the word tacos has two syllables, ta, cos. Ta forming one syllable and cos another syllable. Uno, which means one, has two syllables, u, no. Uno. Aprender. Aprender has three syllables, aprender, which means to learn. Restaurante has four syllables, restaurante, which means restaurant. Don't worry if you didn't completely understand what I just said. You will eventually, but this will help you so you can start reading in Spanish easily. So let's begin with letter A. Letter A is a vowel and is very open. So in Spanish, sounds like A. A. Very similar to the one in apple. An example of a word in Spanish is alto. Alto. Alto means tall. Another example is the word árbol. Árbol. Árbol means tree. And notice how the sound is very open. Árbol. Letter V in Spanish sounds like V. V. Very similar to the one in boy. An example would be the word barco. Barco. Barco means boat. Another example is the word boda. Boda means wedding. So remember the sounds A and B. Let's continue with letter C. Letter C in Spanish sounds C. C. But this letter has two different sounds or pronunciations. The first one is similar to the one in cup. And this sound will apply when the letter C is followed by the vowels A, O, and U. An example of this will be the word cuatro. Cuatro. Cuatro means four. And notice how the letter C is followed by the vowel U. That's why it sounds as cuatro, as in cup. Another example is the word comer. Comer. Comer means to eat. And notice how the vowel O is after the letter C. So it sounds comer. Now the other sound is similar to the one in state, just like an S. And this sound will apply when the letter C is followed by the vowels E and I. An example of this will be the word cinco. Cinco. Cinco means five. And notice how the vowel I is after the letter C. So it sounds like cinco, similar to the one in state. Another example is the word centro. Centro. Centro means center. And notice how the vowel E is after the C. So letter C is followed by the vowel E. So it sounds centro, as in state. Now let's see some examples combining the two sounds. For example, conciencia means conscience. Conciencia. And notice how the first C sounds as in cup, because it's followed by the vowel O. The other two C's are followed by the vowel I, so they both sound as in state. Conciencia. Another example is conocer. Conocer. Conocer means to know. The first C is followed by the vowel O, and it sounds as in cup. Co. And the other sounds as in state because it's followed by the vowel E. Conocer. Ser. The other example is the same. The letter O is after the letter C, so it sounds as in cup. In cocina. Cocina means kitchen. And the next C is followed by the vowel I, so it sounds as in state. Cocina. So letter D in Spanish sounds like de. De. Very similar to the one in doll. So an example to this letter in Spanish is the word dedo. Dedo. Dedo means finger. So the sound of the letter D in Spanish is de. De. Just as in dedo. The letter E in Spanish sounds E. E. Just as in enter. Enter. So an example would be the word entrar, which means enter. Entrar. Entrar. So the sound for the letter E is E. E. The letter F in Spanish is F. F. So as you can see, it's very similar to the F in English. You just need to add an E to the end. So it's F. And it's similar to the one in gift. So an example of a Spanish word containing the letter F is the word frío. Frío. Frío means cold. So remember the sound F. F as in gift. So the letter D, E, and F in Spanish are D, E, F. D, E, F. So far, we have learned A, B, C, D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E, F. So let's move on with letter G. Letter G in Spanish sounds like G. G. And this letter has two different sounds, just as the letter C. So the first sound is similar to the one in guy. And this sound will apply when letter G is followed by the vowels A, O, and U. An example is the word gato. Gato. Gato means cat. Notice how gato sounds like guy. Gato, guy. It's very similar. So the other sound is similar to the German word Bach. In English, I think there is no sound like this one. That's why I'm putting this example as the German word Bach. And this sound will apply when letter G is followed by the vowels E and I. An example is the word imagen. Imagen. That means image. Notice how imagen sounds like Bach. Imagen. And gato sounds like guy. Gato, guy. Imagen, imagen. So the letter G is pronounced G, remember. G, and has two sounds. The one as in gato or guy, and the one as in imagen or bag. So letter H, I think this is the most easy one because the letter H is silent. So whenever you see an H, you don't pronounce it, you don't read it, you don't pronounce it. It's silent. For example, the word hola, hola, the H is not pronounced. You are only reading or saying the letter O, L, and A. Hola. So the H is totally silent. Next is letter I. Letter I in Spanish is E. E. Just as in income. An example to this is the word idea. Idea. That means idea. So it's okay if you get confused a little bit when you see, for example, this word. It's probably that you will read it as idea. But in Spanish, the letter I is E. So this is idea. So let's remember all sounds. We have G, H, I. G, H, I. And do you remember the letters that we have learned so far? Remember, is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Now it's time to move on with letter J. And letter J in Spanish sounds like J. J. And is very similar to the German word Bach. Bach. Right, so an example in Spanish would be the word jabón. Jabón. Jabón means soap. Alright, so remember the sound, which is J. J. And the example will be the word jabón. Jabón. Next is letter K. And letter K in Spanish sounds like K. K. As in the word kite. And an example will be the word kilómetro. Kilómetro. So remember the sound, which is K. K as in kite. And the example is the word kilómetro. Kilómetro. Next we have L, which in Spanish sounds like L. L. And it's similar to the one in light. So an example in Spanish will be the word lápiz. Lápiz. So remember the sound L. L as in light. And an example is the word lápiz. Lápiz. So let's remember the letters that we have learned so far. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Let's continue with the letter M. The letter M in Spanish sounds like M. M. Just as in mom. An example of the letter M in a Spanish word is mes. Mes. Mes means month. So remember the sound M as in mom, and the example is the word mes. That means month. So letter N in Spanish sounds like N. N. Very similar to M. See, N. Just as in net. So an example is the word noche. Noche. Noche means night. So remember the sound N as in net, and the example is the word noche. This letter is a letter that doesn't exist in the English dictionary. So you might think that you have never pronounced this one, but maybe you have. Maybe you have, because this letter is very similar to the Italian word lasagna. Lasagna has this lasagna. So this letter in Spanish is ñ. Ñ. So as you can see, it sounds very similar to the one in lasagna. Ñ. Lasagna. So as you can see, you were familiar with, but you didn't know about. So an example is the word niño. Niño. Niño means boy. So let's recall these letters. We have M, N, and ñ. M, N, ñ. Alright, it's time to remember the letters that we have learned so far. So let's start. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, ñ. Right, one more time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, ñ. Let's move on with letter O. Letter O in Spanish sounds like O. O. In Spanish, you don't say the little U sound at the end, it's just O. Similar to the one in orange. And an example would be the word oro. Oro. That means gold. So remember the sound O. O. As in orange. And the example will be the word oro. Letter P in Spanish sounds like P. P. Very similar to the one in Polish. An example will be the word pared. Pared, which means wall. So the sound is P as in Polish, and an example will be pared. Letter Q in Spanish sounds like Q. Q. Very similar, but without the I. It's just Q. As in kite. And an example would be the word quemar. Quemar. Did you notice that I didn't pronounce the letter U in there? Well, the letter Q has an interesting feature. This letter always appears in a combination of the letter U, but the letter U is always silent. In this case, if I read the word as it is, I will read it quemar, but this is wrong, because the U next to the Q is always silent. So we read this as quemar. Quemar, which means to burn. So remember the sound is Q, Q as in kite, but without the puff of air, like kite. And the example will be the word quemar. So remember the sounds O, P, Q. O, P, Q. Okay, let's remember all letters that we have learned so far. Okay, let's start. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, ñ, O, P, Q. One more time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, ñ, O, P, Q. In this video, we're only going to learn the letter R, since this is one of the most difficult letters to learn for the English speaker. So letter R in Spanish sounds like R, R. And this letter has two different sounds, a softer sound and a stronger sound, which is R. R is the stronger sound. So we'll take a look at the softer sound first, which is very similar to the one in ladder. It's very similar but not the same. For example, the word pero means but. Another example would be the word caro. Caro. Caro means expensive. And notice how the letter R doesn't sound like the English R. It's not pero or caro, it's pero. Pero. Or caro. Caro. So it's more similar to the one in ladder. It's really close but not the same. So next we have the stronger sound, which is our tongue vibrating, doing this sound R, R, R. I know it's very difficult for English speaker to do this pronunciation, but with a matter of practice and time, you will eventually get it. An example to this will be the word roto, roto. That means broken. Another example is the word reír, reír, which means to laugh. So in Spanish, we also have the double R or doble R. So whenever you see doble R or double R, it will sound stronger. For example, correr, correr. That means to run. So let's recapitulate. Whenever you see a double R or doble R, it will have a strong pronunciation. For example, correr, correr, that means to run. And perro, perro, that means dog. And whenever a word starts with R or R, it will have a strong pronunciation. For example, rana, rana, that means frog. And ratón, ratón, that means mouse. But most of the times, the R will have a soft pronunciation, like pera. Pera means pear. Another example is the word laberinto. Laberinto. Laberinto means labyrinth. And another example is the word computadora. Computadora, which is computer. So in most of the cases, this will be the pronunciation for R. But there are some exceptions. But we don't need to worry about those right now because we're just getting started. We will eventually see those exceptions in some other classes. Right now we're just learning the sounds. So let's remember the sounds. The R in Spanish is pronounced R, R. And the letter R has two pronunciations, a softer and a stronger. The stronger is R, and the softer is R, R, as in pera or laberinto. Right now it's time to remember all the letters that we have learned so far. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R. Let's continue with letter S, T, and U. The letter S in Spanish sounds like S, S, as in sun. So an example would be the word soñar, soñar. that means to dream. And the word sol, sol, that means sun. Next we have the letter T, which in Spanish sounds like te, te, similar to the one in tall. And an example will be the word tinta, tinta, that means ink. Another example is the word turno, turno, that means turn. Next is the letter U, which in Spanish sounds like U, U, as in book. So an example will be the word unión, unión, which means union. So let's remember the sounds. S, S, T, T, and U, U. Some examples would be the word soñar, sol, tinta, turno, and unión. So let's practice what we have learned so far. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U. Let's move on with letter V, W, and X. The letter V in Spanish sounds like V, V. Another way that this letter is pronounced is V, V. So in Spain it is pronounced V, and in most Latin American countries it is pronounced V. So both are correct. And it sounds similar to the one in lava. So an example would be the word vaca, vaca, that means cow. And viento, viento, that means wind. Now there is the W, which in Spanish sounds like W, W. In some other countries, it is pronounced W, W. Especially in Spain, they pronounce it like W. And in most Latin American countries, it is pronounced W. And it sounds similar to the one in well. So an example will be the word Walter, Walter, which is the name. So the letter W in Spanish is not so common. It is mostly used for foreign words or names. So don't worry too much about this one because it sounds very similar to the one in English. So let's move on with letter X, which in Spanish sounds like X, X. And it sounds very similar to the one in box. As you can see, oxígeno, oxígeno means oxygen, and it sounds pretty much the same, oxígeno. So let's remember the sounds. It is V or V, and it sounds like lava. An example is the word vaca and viento. Next there is W or W, sounds similar to well. For example, Walter, Walter. Then we have X, sounds similar to the one in box. For example, oxígeno. Now let's remember the letters that we have learned so far, which are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X. Let's move on with letter Y and Z. Letter Y in Spanish sounds like Y, Y, as in Jack. An example will be the word yate. Yate, that means yacht. And this letter in Spanish is also used as end. And it sounds like E. E. For example, if you want to say and you say E2 using the letter Y. E2. But if you see letter Y in a word, it is pronounced as in J. Yate, for example. Yate. And only when it is used as end, it will sound like E. E2, which means and you. Now Z sounds like zeta. Zeta, as in sun. This pronunciation is mostly used in Latin America and southern Spain. In northern and central Spain, it is pronounced as theta, similar to the one in thin. So it is pronounced theta. And both of them are correct. If you're in northern Spain or central Spain, this is the pronunciation that they use. Now, if you're in Latin America, the pronunciation commonly used is zeta. Zeta, just as the S. And an example will be the word zorro, zorro, or zorro, zorro. That means fox. In other classes, I will be explaining the differences of these sounds between Spain and Latin American countries. But right now, it's important for you to know how they commonly sound and to be able to recognize the sound. Before we conclude, it's important for you to know this. In Spanish, you will see many times the letter C and the letter H combined. These letters combined sound like sh, as in chocolate, for example. And an example will be the word chocolate, which means chocolate, and chocar, that means to crash or to collide. And when you see a double L combined, it will sound as in jack, mostly in Latin America, and as in yacht in most parts of Spain. For example, lluvia, lluvia, or lluvia, lluvia. That means rain. And villano, villano. That means villain. So remember the sounds when you see a C and H combined, sounds as in chocolate, chocar, chocolate. And when you see a double L combined, sounds as in jack. For example, lluvia or villano. These two combinations of letters don't exist in the Spanish alphabet. They used to, but not anymore. So it's important for you to know that. So let's say the Spanish alphabet aloud. Is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.